thank you everyone for joining us for today's CEJA pre-apprenticeship workshop. Today we're focused on writing an effective proposal. Some of what you see today is also covered in other sessions, so I will kind of walk through some of it pretty quickly, but otherwise we're really going to focus on how to read the NOFO document and how that should inform the way you write your proposal. We do have, first of all, I should introduce myself. I'm Brian Richard. I'm with the Center for Governmental Studies at Northern Illinois University. And I'm part of the team along with folks at CDEC, the University of Illinois, that are working with DCEO to put together these CEJA programs, helping them write the NOFO, get the program details ironed out, get stakeholder input, all of those things, and then kind of working with them through the process of getting the grants out there and these programs up and running, which I know everybody's been waiting for a number of months. So CEJA workforce programs, again, this was covered in pretty detailed form at the Bidders Conference last week on April 27th, so you can go back and review the recording of that. But the CEJA programs really have four main equity-focused workforce training programs. The NOFO that's out there now, the first one out there is the ClimateWorks Pre-apprenticeship program, but there will also be NOFOs in the near future focused on the Clean Jobs Workforce Network program, the Returning Residents Clean Jobs Training Program, and the Energy Navigator training program, or program. That's not a training program. That's navigators kind of connect all the dots between all these programs and other programs out there. And the goal of these programs is to prepare people either for a job directly in the clean energy industry or to enter an apprenticeship that prepares them for the clean energy industry. So, as you know, the pre-apprenticeship NOFO was released last week, I believe it was. In the next few weeks, we expect that the Energy Transition Navigator Program NOFO will be released, followed by the Clean Jobs Workforce Network Program. And then finally, we're expecting early summer, hopefully in June, that the Returning Residents Clean Jobs Program NOFO will be released. And each of those will have similar technical assistance sessions attached to the bidders conferences and so forth. So the ClimateWorks Pre-apprenticeship program is, again, one of the CEJA workforce programs, and it has the following goals. It really wants to equitably grow the construction and building trades to meet the demand for clean energy workers, prepare people to succeed in apprenticeship programs, and ultimately get well-paying jobs in the construction and building trades sectors, and also increase employment opportunities in the clean energy workforce for equity-eligible individuals and communities. As most of us know, and as we heard in the Bidders Conference, unfortunately, the construction industry is not as diverse as the overall Illinois workforce, and so these programs really help to attempt to address African Americans tend to be underrepresented in construction sector, and women especially are underrepresented in the construction sector. So these programs really are focused on improving the numbers to make the construction sector look more like the overall Illinois workforce. So we're just going to start with what the legislation actually says about who can apply for funding and deliver the ClimateWorks Pre-apprenticeship program. The legislation says that organizations that provide employment, skill development, or related services, those that demonstrate relationships with residents and organizations serving communities in the region, have a history of serving low-wage or low-skilled workers from economically disadvantaged communities. And finally, the organizations that demonstrate relationships with apprenticeship programs and contractor associations. It's really important that these programs have a strong connection to those apprenticeship programs and to employers. Based on the program description and the way the program is going to be run, there's also a number of characteristics that, of organizations that are more likely, I think, to succeed to deliver these programs. So I think organizations that have previous experience delivering construction and skills training, that have those strong ties to the target communities and the populations in the region. Also, as I just said, strong ties to registered apprenticeship programs. The primary goal of this program is to prepare people to enter and succeed in the registered apprenticeship programs. The organization should also have experience providing wraparound supports, strong ties to other organizations for referrals. We're going to talk about some of the best practices, and I think that's an important one that we'll use that as an example. Ability to meet people's needs quickly and efficiently, and again, strong ties to target communities and populations. So let's just talk about some broad overall tips for preparing strong proposals. It really starts with that notice of funding opportunity, what we call the NOFO. It contains all of the information you need to successfully apply for this program, and this applies to all of the programs. Make sure you understand all of those requirements. So, you know, everybody kind of has different ways of doing this, but some strategies that we think are effective when you're reading through this NOFO, highlight sections that stand out to you as being important. Really dissect the information, and we're going to talk about in detail some approaches to do that. Really outline key points, make notes as you're going through and say, yeah, this is really important. We need to make sure we address these issues. Ask questions. If things aren't clear, there's a way for you to ask questions about what's in the NOFO, and we've got a number of questions already. At the end, we'll describe exactly how you do that. You know, there's a lot of information in that NOFO, and some of it may not be exactly clear to everyone that reads it. So we want to provide opportunities with you to ask questions and make sure you understand everything. Also discuss it with your team, discuss it with your colleagues in your organization. I think it's important also to reach out to other organizations and talk about, you know, what you're seeing in the NOFO and how to put together a good team to apply for this. There are a number of definitions spelled out in the NOFO, and the very specific definitions about things like, what does community-based organization mean? What does equity investment eligible person mean? What does the eligible communities, how are those defined? What does pre-apprenticeship mean? It's important that you not assume what these terms and others in the NOFO mean. Make sure that as you're putting together your application, you make it clear that you understand what these definitions are, and you understand that who the target population of those you're going to serve, and the type of training that you're going to deliver. Again, this might be an area where you want to ask for clarification on things, and we encourage you to do that. So after you read through this funding opportunity, you think about whether your organization is really a good fit for this program. It's going to take a lot of time to put together the application for this. And if you don't think your organization is a good fit for this, you might consider waiting for some of the other opportunities, for example, or looking for other opportunities for your organization to get into these types of programs or similar programs. And I think you need to consider whether your organization is capable of being the lead organization for this project. I think we see these are going to be big grants, and we see that the successful applicants will likely be kind of a consortium of organizations. There's a lot of funding involved. The regions that they cover are very large, and so so consider whether your organization is capable of leading an effort of multiple organizations working together, or whether you think your organization would be a good partner for that lead organization. At least one organization has stated publicly in the meeting last week that they are going to apply as a lead organization, and I think invited others to contact them if they're interested. But so think about the capabilities of your organization and where you fit into the pieces of this program as described in the NOFO. Maybe you're better at occupational skills training. Maybe you're better at things like case management and determining and providing supportive services, things like that. You know, and then talk with other potential partners and put together a team that really does a good job of addressing all of the components. So kind of big picture about your approach to preparing a strong proposal. Make sure you're responding to the content of the NOFO. We're going to talk a lot about this today, but you know, most of us on the team working on this project has, you know, we've evaluated applications to similar programs in the past, and something that we see occasionally is an organization, all they want to talk about is the strengths of their organization, but they're not really responding to the content of the NOFO. They're not describing how the strengths of that organization actually apply to delivering the services that are described in the NOFO. So your program that you're describing should strongly align with the program description that is in the NOFO. Something else we're going to talk about is that the criteria for reviewing the proposals that organizations submit are spelled out right in the NOFO. They're telling you how these proposals are going to be evaluated. So we're going to talk about how you can use that to improve the quality of your proposal. So while it's important to respond to the content of the NOFO, it's also important for you to highlight the strengths of your team. Tell your story, but connect your story to the program requirements as spelled out in the NOFO. Make a case for your project. You're applying for this funding because you think you can deliver this and make a difference in the lives of job seekers. Talk about how you think you can make that potential impact. And then we're going to talk a lot about this today. So much about your proposal is going to hinge on the staff that is going to deliver, who are the people that are going to deliver these services, both within your organization and in partner organizations. How much is it going to cost to deliver those services? Of course, those two things are strongly linked. Staffing requires a budget, but there's also going to be other budget materials that you need to think about as you think about your program. You know, are you going to be providing educational materials, things like that? And then, of course, we keep talking about partnerships. If there's components that you think maybe your organization is not well suited to deliver, look for partners. Or if you think that you have something to you're not ready to be a lead organization, but you have something you can deliver well that's in this in the NOFO, look for a lead organization to partner with. So yeah, we're going to hit staffing, budget, and partnerships all along the way as we discuss this today. So now we're going to spend a lot of time walking through the NOFO and especially diving into some of the details of key sections. So that's the next section that we're going to talk about. So let's just stop for a second. Many of you have probably already read the NOFO, downloaded it, looked through it. Are there any questions that you have as kind of you came into this session with that you want to jot down in the chat? Maybe we can respond to those questions now. We also, there's an FAQ section of the CEJA website where questions that have been previously asked are answered so that everybody has the opportunity of seeing the responses. There may be some questions you have today that we're not able to answer right away that we need to kind of huddle with the DCEO team to get the answer to. But if you do have questions, yeah, maybe put them in the chat. And you can do that throughout the thing. We have, I'm not able to monitor the chat as I go through the material, but we do have, I do have some partners with me here who are monitoring the chat and who will try to respond as we go or bring them up to me so that we can discuss. So here's the sections. I think Linda put a link to the NOFO website. It's also included here. And we will be providing the slides and the recording of this session on the CEJA website. But the NOFO is broken down into these sections. It starts out with a broad, a detailed program description, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Talks about the funding information, how much funding is available, how, you know, roughly speaking, how it might be divided among the regions, and basic information about restrictions to the funding. Some eligibility, that we talked about the eligibility information, but it's spelled out in the NOFO as well, who's eligible to, and also some things that your organization needs to do to make itself eligible. There's some technical requirements you have to do to make sure you're eligible for the funding. Detailed information about applying and submitting your application, where it needs to be submitted to, the deadline for submitting the application. And then I think this next section that we will talk about later is really important, that application review information. How are the applications going to be evaluated? How are they going to be scored? Which is ultimately the process that decides who gets funded. And then a lot of this is kind of the lawyer's language about what happens with the process of awarding the grant and how they are administering going forward. And while a lot of that is kind of the technical details, I think it's important for you to understand that information, because some of it relates to how you will, or some of the requirements on the grantee once the grant is awarded, things like reporting, that I think we'll talk about. You need to think about that as you're building your budget. That's can be take up a lot of time for the administration of the grant, and some context and other information. And we'll walk through each of these in some detail. So in addition to the NOFO, on that website that Linda just provided the link to, there is a lot of other information and a lot of other documents. So the NOFO itself is just this first link, the Climate Works Pre-Apprenticeship NOFO, the document that we're kind of working. But there's also documents that you're required to submit along with your application. There's what they call a uniform application, and that's kind of the basic information about your organization. There's a budget template where you're going to put the details about the budget that you're putting together for the program. There's a conflict of interest disclosure and other mandatory disclosure forms. These are all required to be part of your application packet. So you need to make sure that you're not just putting together this kind of written application, that these other forms and documents are filled out and submitted at the same time. There's also links to best practice documents on this. So there's really a lot of valuable information about putting together a high quality pre-apprenticeship program, about diversity, equity, inclusion strategies for your program. And a lot of those, and I'll talk about an example of how you might use those. A lot of those are going to give you a lot of good information to improve the quality of your proposal. So we talked about dissecting the NOFO itself. So let's talk about maybe some strategies about how you might dissect sections of the NOFO as you're reading it. So this is language directly from the program description in the NOFO. And notice the first line of this section, I highlighted it in red. It's not highlighted in red in the NOFO, but it says projects funded under this program must include the following program elements. And you're encouraged to incorporate national best practices. So this set of program elements that the NOFO describes over the next 5 pages or so, your application must address all of these elements. It states it right on the first line of this section. And so a strategy I might use is just highlight passages, phrases in here that you think are important as you're reading it. We need to design this pre-apprenticeship center. And the purpose of it is to recruit, pre-screen, and provide pre-apprenticeship skills training to a diverse pipeline of workers. So, it's not just we're going to open and say, come here if you want pre-apprenticeship training. We need to figure out how to reach out to the target population, how we're going to prepare a diverse pipeline of workers for careers in construction and building trades. This NOFO also includes an energy transition barrier reduction program, which you'll need to address. So this is funding in addition to the skills training funding, where you can provide some barrier reduction funds and barrier reduction services to the participants of the program. And so here again, you might be making notes as you're reading this. We need to make sure we talk about how we're going to administer the barrier reduction program in our proposal. So you take those sections that you highlighted, and again, here's the notes you're making. Turn it into a list of requirements. These are the things that we must address in our proposal. Look, we need to figure out how to recruit equity eligible participants and provide assessments, making sure that they're prepared either to start our program, or maybe they have enough skills where they don't need our pre-apprenticeship program. And we can refer them directly to, say, the workforce hubs. Not everybody that walks through your door is going to be a good candidate for the training. Some of them might not be ready to start the training, and you're going to have to refer them to other training to get them ready. Some of them may be advanced enough that, excuse me, that they don't need your training. You can refer them to other programs. We need to provide the skills training. Excuse me. We need to make sure we're preparing our participants for apprenticeship programs and careers in the building and trades and so as you're reading through the program requirements, you're going to realize that's more than just skills training. There's a lot of other ways to prepare people to succeed in the building trades. So, and think about the underrepresented populations that have had trouble in the past entering and succeeding in these apprenticeship programs. How are you going to prepare them to be successful in these programs? Some of the eligible participants are going to need barrier reduction services. How are you going to assess the participants for their needs? And those needs may change as they move through the program. So how are you going to regularly check in with them to see if all of their needs are being met? How are you going to coordinate with other organizations to deliver these services? You may recognize that, well, we're really strong in this particular service, say the skills training, but we need to find some partners for, say, the barrier reduction services or case management, things like that. And again, critical to this program is that connection with apprenticeship programs. Do you already have good, strong connections with registered apprenticeship programs, or is that something you need to figure out how to develop? Not only develop, but demonstrate in your application that you have those connections through things like memorandums of understanding, so that it's clear to the reviewers that you have those connections. Again, there's these links to all these best practice documents on the NOFO page. And this will help you flesh out how you're going to deliver these programs. Our notes and our reading of the NOFO told us what we need to do. The proposal, you need to really say how you're going to do that. How are you going to deliver work-based learning? How are you going to connect with employers so that you have some employers on board to help support to help support the delivery of that work-based learning? Or do you have other ways of delivering work-based learning? Do you have some sort of internal construction projects that you can use for work-based learning? Some programs do things like that. Inclusive outreach strategies. There's a lot of good resources around that in these best practices. And just how are you going to do all of these different things that you need to do to successfully deliver this program? So here's a way that you might, as you're pulling your information together to prepare to write your proposal, the way you might organize some of the information that you're collecting. We know we need to recruit from the equity eligible populations. So start thinking about how we might do that. What are some of the best practices we see from those resources and other resources? Those are not the only resources about best practice. Even your own experience may play into this. We've really had success with recruiting populations through this process, things like that. So, if you have previous experience, it's great to bring that out in the proposal and talk about successes that you've had with some of these program elements. And so let's talk about how you might do that with the best practices. So, on the topic of recruiting, so one of the links in the National Best Practices part of the website is a document called Principles for Equity in Apprenticeship. It's from the organization Center on Wisconsin Strategy. In that, you'll find they lay out some best practices that can be used to reach equity eligible populations. One thing they found is mentorship is a really great way of reaching this population. When people see people that look like them that are succeeding in apprenticeships or are succeeding in the occupation, it really can be an effective way of connecting with them and making them see that, oh, I could be successful in this occupation too. And so you might think about ways of connecting with current apprentices or current clean energy construction workers who can maybe be involved in your outreach efforts when you're recruiting participants, maybe involved in talking, mentoring your participants as they go through their program. So this is something that's been found to be effective in evaluations of pre-apprenticeship programs and studies of pre-apprenticeship programs. And so think about how you might incorporate that into your program design. And then think about, okay, this is really a best practice that we want to incorporate into our recruiting efforts. What kind of staff do we need to implement this practice? What kind of budget? I mean, do we, for example, do we want to offer a stipend to our mentors who are coming in and helping us recruit and mentor our participants? What kind of are there organizations out there that we can partner with to implement this practice into our recruiting? And so you might have a staff person that may or may not need to be focused on this full time, but maybe as part of their job is working with mentors and potential mentors. But think about the staff requirements for programs like that as you're trying to incorporate it into your program description. So here's another section of the NOFO that focuses on geographic coverage. And so you can see from the map, these are large areas that need to be covered. There's only 3 grants, and each grant covers one of these regions. Of course, the northeast region is the smallest in terms of land size, but obviously that's where most of the population of Illinois is located. And so, maybe not as much geographic coverage, but to cover the population, you're going to think about how you're going to need to provide access to services across there. And then as we go south, obviously the state gets more and more rural, and how are we going to make these programs accessible to people that live across these large rural areas? So both in terms of recruiting the target populations, knowing where the energy equity communities are, where are the equity individuals located throughout the region. So how do we recruit those individuals, but then also how are we going to deliver the services to them if they decide to come into our program? How are we going to make the training and other services accessible to our target populations? It's going to be a big challenge in all of these regions. And so here's where you might be thinking, do I need to bring in some partners to help cover these regions, things like that. The equity eligible communities, there is a map. There's a link to the map here that shows where they're located. Again, pretty concentrated in the Chicago northeast part of the state, but they're located throughout the state and spread out again in these large rural areas. And so how are you going to make your program accessible to the participants that live in these communities? And again, how's that going to affect the way you staff your program? How's it going to affect your budget? How's it going to affect how you bring in partners, how you partner with other organizations? So here's just an example, and please don't interpret this as an expectation of where facilities will be located. We're just putting up an example. If you're thinking about that middle region of the state, IDOT regions 2 and 3, you might think, well, we might have to have a training location in Peoria, in Rockford, in Champaign, in Danville. You know, is that something that our organization can provide, or do we need to partner with some other organization in those? If we're partnering with them, what staff do they have to deliver services? If we're delivering it, what staff do we need to have at these locations? And again, what's the budget? Are we going to have to pay for a building to house the program? Are we going to have staff that has a pretty large travel budget if we're moving staff around to provide services at these locations? Think about all of the budget implications of covering these large regional organizations, these large regions. And again, I don't want there to be a misunderstanding. This is just a hypothetical example of where locations might be located. So there is also a section on staffing in the program description, and it has this list of required staff roles. You're going to have some administration manage the grant. You need staff focused on outreach and recruitment, on the intake process. How are we collecting information from participants and starting them the process of understanding the program? How are we going to both assess and deliver wraparound services, those supportive services for participants that might need things like help with transportation, help with childcare, these kinds of services that might be needed. Student support service, these are kind of like the tutoring, the help with the academic side of the program. Are you going to have people available for, say, like you might call it office hours, where students can come for help when they need it? Or are you going to set it up so you can make appointments for these kind of services? Who's going to deliver those services? Again, what are the budget implications? These programs need instructors. This is occupational skills training that needs skilled instructors. Engagement with employers and apprenticeship programs is not going to happen on its own, obviously, too. You need to have somebody that's really focused on this, building those relationships with employers and apprenticeship programs. As your participants are completing the program and are transitioning to apprenticeship programs or into the workforce, who's going to work to help them with that process? I think there's also expectation for a lot of participants that they may need services beyond completion of the training, follow-up services, making sure they're getting what they need, and they may need some continued supportive services as they move into the job and apprenticeship programs. And data entry, I think this is something that a lot of grantees don't think about on the front end. DCO collects data about the participants so that they can track outcomes, so they can evaluate the effectiveness of these programs and figure out ways to improve these programs. And so somebody needs to be responsible for getting that data entered into the system, into the participant tracking and participant case management systems. So again, it's important to think about staff capacity for this and how it relates to budget. And there's a table in the NOFO on page 8 that kind of walks through all these roles, and a table that you can fill out and say these are the staff people that work on. In some cases, some of these services might be one person might be able to deliver multiple pieces of these roles. In other cases, it might take multiple people to deliver just one of these roles. You might need multiple outreach and recruitment personnel. And so this is not a one-to-one. It's not expected that there's one person for each of these roles. Some might have multiple people, others, one person might deliver, might serve in multiple roles. So here's a way you might think about this. Think about the staff at my organization for each role. Do I already have staff in my organization that can cover these roles? For example, administrative, yeah, we can do that. We're going to be the lead organization. We have a lot of experience in these areas. We've got it covered. But as we bring on this new program to an organization, we might need some help with application and recruitment, for example, especially thinking about the geography of this. The energy transition navigators are going to get up and running here in the next few months. So I think that's a natural partner for those activities. But there may be organizations on the ground in communities that you can also partner with around this. Maybe wraparound service. That is just not something our organization has done in the past. Again, these are all kind of hypothetical ways to think about this. And so it's not something we have experience with. So we're going to work with community-based organizations to help us provide wraparound services, and just go through the roles one by one and think about, yep, I know who's going to do this, and we've got this covered. Maybe, well, we've got someone that can do it in this location, but we understand that we need to cover multiple locations or something. So we're going to partner with others, walk through it, and then as you're putting together your application, describe who's going to do what. How are these roles all going to be covered? And then, so as you're putting together your application, we thought it would be helpful just to kind of define some, make some distinctions between different types of organization. So you're going to have a main grantee, a lead organization for each of these programs, for each region that's going to deliver this program. This is going to be the organization most likely that organizes the proposal and then administers the program. And this is going to be the organization that is really overall responsible for carrying out the scope of work. This is the organization that's going to bring in partners, but it's up to them to make sure the partners are performing their portion of the scope of work. And then likely that lead organization is going to have sub-grantees or sub-recipients. And so these are organizations that are going to carry out a piece of the scope of work. And that piece of the scope of work should be spelled out in your proposal. We're going to use organization ABC to deliver our wraparound services. This is how that organization is going to deliver those services in these various locations that are in our service area. And then you might have contractors or vendors. And these are like supplies that you may be purchasing that might be needed for your program, or even services. And so like training materials, or things like, if you have some building materials that you're going to use in your training, these don't necessarily have to be spelled out in detail. Just we're budgeting. We know that the instructional supplies for this program cost, say, $100 per participant. We're expecting this many participants, so we're budgeting for those supplies. So, for example, a major training provider that you're going to partner with to deliver, say, the occupational training, that's probably going to be a subrecipient. That's a major part of your program, the delivery of those training services. So that's going to be a subgrantee that you're going to spell out who's going to do that, what organization is going to do that. You need to demonstrate that that organization has the capacity to deliver those training services. Whereas a contractor or vendor might be, again, a supplier of training materials or something like that. Again, just think about ways you can organize your thinking about this. There's also some requirements depending on the role of each organization. So GATA qualification is required, and there's a whole session on GATA qualification, I think, coming up Friday. But the main grantee has to be pre-qualified in the GATA system. Subgrantees do not, but they need to be in good standing with the state. So if one of your subgrantees, say, has received a grant in the past but has not delivered successfully, or did not perform the grant requirements successfully, they might not be in good standing with the state if they didn't, say, do all the reporting that was required as part of that grant and things like that. So you need to make sure that your partners are in good standing. Don't necessarily have to be GATA pre-qualified, but they need to be in good standing with the state. They have to be on record for the grant. So as you're applying, subgrantees need to be identified in the grant, and there needs to be a formal memorandum of understanding saying these are the services that the subgrantee is going to provide, services or goods. This is the funding that is associated with those. I think it's good to lay out staff expectations and things. I think a lot of detail is good in those memorandums of understanding. Main grantee, of course, has to develop the overall budget. A subgrantee, if they're receiving more than $150,000, also has to develop their own budget for that funding. If it's under $150,000, you don't have to provide that detailed budget, but for those subrecipients that are partners at a level above 150,000, they also have to work through that detailed budget process. Also, staffing planning. Again, obviously main grantee, but subrecipients also have to describe their staff and how relate that to the delivery of the services. And they're all, I think, on the project plan. So again, another section of the program description, really important for this program, the equity-focused program culture. Need to make sure you're considering the background and experience of the participants as they come into your program. Consider equity in the outreach and enrollment. Your enrollment process should identify and address barriers to entry. Again, not everybody might be appropriate for this program, but some of them might just have small barriers that need to be overcome, either through the funds that are available for barrier reduction or maybe additional training or something like that. Make sure that you have the shared identity of your program, that you have a welcoming and inclusive environment. Make sure that participants feel comfortable in the environment that you're bringing them into. And also make sure you're considering equity as your participants finish your program and enter the registered apprenticeship programs or enter jobs. and this obviously also should be considered in the training and partnerships that you have with other organizations. Some of your partnerships may be focused on this issue, helping to provide, make sure equity is infused throughout your program. So again, a lot of those national best practice documents that are linked on the website are good sources for the how of doing this. How do you create an inclusive learning environment? Well, look to see how other programs have done this successfully. You can find some of that in those national best practice documents. The goal, again, should be to make sure that you're reaching the target population and then preparing your participants to be successful when they transition into the registered apprenticeship or other employment opportunities. So, and again, I'm going to say this over and over and over again. How does this affect your staff? What staff are you going to need to address these issues? What are the budget implications? What partnerships do you need to form to deliver these? Wraparounds and supports for students. There's a table in the NOFO that really lays out some of the wraparound supports that you are going to encounter with your participants. The program requires stipends to participants as they're going through. Explain how you're going to determine the level of those stipends and how they'll be delivered. But participants, in addition to that required element, some may need help with transportation, childcare. If you're delivering services virtually online, make sure participants have the equipment they need to participate if that's your one of your modes of delivery. Like all things financial literacy, you know, again, you'll also see a lot of this in excuse me, in those best practice documents. One of the things, the student support services, again, so this is kind of on the academic side. Other pre-apprenticeship programs have found that a lot of participants need tutoring, especially in math. There's a decent amount of math in construction, and so this needs to be covered. And some students are going to need help getting up to speed to get their level where they need it to enter the program. You might need to offer makeup classes, some kind of flexible delivery schedule, you know, retesting or you know, supplemental educational opportunities. You might find that your participants are really struggling with a particular topic, and you might want to provide some other types of educational opportunities for them. Transition also has supportive services attached to it. You know, helping them learn how to do well in interviews, helping them write a resume, you know, job search assistant, helping them connect them to opportunities in either jobs or in apprenticeships. How are you going to address all of these things? And again, strategies. Who is going to deliver these services? And again, cost. You might want to break it down. Some of these costs directly tied to participant services. You might want to estimate how much per participant this is going to cost. This will help you with your overall budget. Yeah, if we know, well, our stipend is going to be, say, for example, $2,000 for our students. And again, that's just a made-up number. That's not an expectation for any. And we expect to serve 10 students per cohort. Well, then that's we're going to have $20,000 in stipends per cohort, and so you can start building your budget based on your participants that you expect to serve in that way. There's some curriculum requirements spelled out in the NOFO. There's I forget these acronyms, but there's curriculum ready to go for pre-apprenticeship programs from NABTU and NCCER. Some safety training is also required of the program. OSHA training, first aid and CPR. But you're also going to want to deliver some instruction on employability skills, what they're going to expect on the job site, what are the expectations of being in an apprenticeship program and being in the construction industry. Some clean energy basics. This is not just a general construction program. The goal of the legislation is to provide opportunities for people in clean energy. And you might have other topics you want to cover, either based on the national best practices or on your previous experience working with similar programs. So thinking about how you're going to deliver these programs, how many hours it's going to take for staff some time. You know, this was an area where we heard a lot during the stakeholder input process, in that a lot of people believe that there should be a lot of flexibility in the delivery of these programs because the target population, you know, they may be trying to work as they go through the program. They may have family care needs as they go through the program. So making things like full-time and part-time options for participants. Maybe some virtual online delivery versus face-to-face. Some people don't do well with online learning and need face-to-face. Others are going to need virtual options, either because of geography or other limitations for getting to a face-to-face delivery. We heard about programs that are delivered on demand, especially like the work-based learning opportunities where you know, there were staff available to deliver work-based learning opportunities throughout the day, and people could drop in for 2 hours or so and go through some work-based learning when their schedule allowed it. So just flexibility in the timing of delivery of some of these. And we also think there's going to be need for ongoing instruction after program completion. As people enter these full registered apprenticeship programs, they may need to come back for some you know, maybe additional instruction on something they might be struggling with in the apprenticeship program, or you know, review some of the material you covered in the program. Transition services, again, the main requirements that you're going to see. The focus of the program is really that transition to the registered apprenticeship programs. So we need to see you demonstrate that you have these formal partnerships with apprenticeship programs, with unions, with trade groups, or individual contractors. That includes matriculation agreement, and that just means, say, an apprenticeship program has agreed to take on program completers from your pre-apprenticeship program. But some of your participants may not, may decide that construction is not for them, and so helping them transition to further education, say maybe in a community college program or something, kind of a secondary transition. And some of them may be ready to go directly into employment, so helping them make that transition. I think all of these transition services are going to be important. And you're going to have to provide continued case management, tracking, support after transition. Again, the expectation is that you will continue to support these participants after they've completed your training part of your program, and help them succeed into either the registered apprenticeship program or employment. And I can see that this is taking longer than I expected. So we have a number of kind of similar examples that I'll walk through a little more quickly. But again, staff, partnership, budget. How are you going to deliver these services and programs? Funding information. Again, so for each region, the expectation is that these grants will be in the $2 to $4 million range for the pre-apprenticeship program, with an additional $1 to $2.5 million for the delivery of the barrier transition program. So the combination of the two put together going to be in the $3 to $6 million range or so for this is for the initial year, with the expectation that the programs, if successful, will renew in the subsequent 2 years. In general, I think the expectation is that the funding will be associated with a number of participants, so that the average funding per participant works out to be about $10,000. Understand that that number may vary for individual participants quite significantly. Some are going to need, say, significant barrier reduction services or things. But I think this is really a guideline for a starting point as you're building your budget and thinking about the number of participants that you're going to serve. And so all of these components are going to go into your overall budget. There's a budget template, and it's a spreadsheet form with a bunch of different tabs on it that includes personnel. How much staff are you going to have in your budget? What are the fringe benefits for those staff? You're going to have travel. You're going to have some equipment costs, other supplies. You're going to contract out. So all of these different categories. I think we're going to cover this budget in more detail, perhaps in the GATA session that's coming up on Friday, and if not, in some of the sessions for first-time applicants next week. And those sessions are open to anyone, even though they might be labeled as first-time applicant. Those sessions are going to be open to everyone. Again, we covered this eligibility spelled out in the NOFO. Also, kind of some capacity-based eligibility information. So really, your goal with your application is to demonstrate that your organization has the capacity to deliver the program as described in the NOFO. So as I said in the beginning, there's a number of forms that need to be included along with that main application. And those are all linked just below the NOFO link on that NOFO webpage. The uniform grant application is a fillable PDF format. The budget document that I just discussed, and then a couple of disclosures of conflict of interest and mandatory disclosure. And for the most part, those documents are just kind of fill in the blanks kind of things where you are addressing each section. And so here, after that program description in the NOFO, then it moves on to the application and submission information. And it spells out the sections that are expected to be included in your application and gives you page limits for each of those sections. So, and we're going to walk through each of these in a little bit of detail. So the executive summary. This is just a single page summary that kind of is the overall description of your program. I would probably think about doing this last after you've walked through all the details of your program. Come back and do this one-page summary of your program, what you're going to do, who's going to deliver the services, the amount of funding that you're requesting. So here, the biggest section of your proposal, 20 pages, is what is called the technical proposal. And this is really where you're going to describe the program activities and the outcomes that the grant is going to support. Now, I've underlined a very important line here that each section of this technical proposal, and we're going to walk through each section one by one, it corresponds with the application review criteria. So the way you respond to each of these sections is going to be how your application is evaluated to determine who receives the grant. So the first section is talks about your organization capacity and your qualifications. So this is four pages. Again, this is really focused on your staff, who's going to deliver these program components. Your partner, you're going to have to talk about your partners, how they're going to help you deliver these program components. And really your goal here is to demonstrate the experience and knowledge of your team. Describe how your team has the capacity to deliver the training program and ultimately meet the outcomes that the program is designed to. You're also going to have to talk about your facilities. Do you have the facilities to be able to deliver these programs? And as it said in the beginning, this section, applicant team organization capacity, there's a section in the application review criteria focused on that, and it tells you exactly the questions that are going to be addressed as the review team goes through your application and does scoring. So these 6 components of application team capacity roughly equal in value each. So the team that's reading these application scoring, they're going to look at this and say, did this application demonstrate that they have the capacity and expertise to successfully and timely deliver the pre-apprenticeship training and administration tasks? And they're going to just walk through these one by one and put a score next to each one. And the total of all those adds up to 35%. So this is over a third of the overall application scoring is focused on the capacity of your team and your facilities. Again, focus on capacity, expertise, the experience, and the qualifications of your team that you put together. The next section is the documentation of need. And in this section, you're going to be focused on how well do you understand the target population, the population to be served, and the job market for the applicants or the graduates of your program. So demonstrate that you understand the population and that you are going to prepare them for the job market or to enter into the apprenticeship programs. And again, questions are right in the NOFO about how these will be evaluated. You can see this is of less importance. In 10% of overall scoring is on the documentation of need. So your project plan, this is really the bulk of your plan, 12 pages. And this really, you're going to walk through that program description on pages 7 through 13 of the NOFO that we talked about earlier and address each of those program components. You're going to have to explain how, you're going to have to explain your plan for delivering each of those program components. It includes everything from the apprenticeship program design, stipends, outreach and recruitment, you know, all of those components that are in there, you're going to have to address in this section of the plan. And as you might expect, this is another significant component of the review criteria. 35% of the overall, kind of based on these various components, again, that correspond with that section. And then the final component of your plan is the budget narrative. So you're going to have to submit that budget where you're line by line describing the costs of your program. Here is where your chance to explain why these various components are included in your budget. Address program efficiency, like talk about this. This is our cost per eligible participant. You might have other sources of funding that you're going to use for this program. Here's where you describe those sources of funding. And again, this is a one-year budget, so this should be the description of your budget for your the program's first year. So really focus on that one-year budget. Again, cost effectiveness for this budget section is 20% of the overall scoring of the applications. So I think it's important here that the two sections, organizational capacity, kind of focused on the capacity of your staff and your partners, and that program design section, that's 70% of the scoring criteria for the overall evaluation of these programs. So those are obviously, as demonstrated through the scoring, the most important pieces of this. How are you going to, what are the services you're going to deliver, and what is your capacity to deliver those services? So again, as I said earlier, there's a number of attachments that are required in addition to that 20-page proposal. And we're going to talk about each of those attachments one by one here. So the first attachment is your proposed work plan. And this is where you just kind of walk through and talk about the number of individuals that you're going to recruit, bring into enroll in your program, and then complete your program. And the definition of each of those are included in this document. And then you're going to project your outcomes. The individuals transition into a registered apprenticeship program, or at least applied for a registered apprenticeship program. We know the timing of some of this can be challenging because all of the registered apprenticeship programs have kind of these different entry windows and things. So we understand that's difficult, but the outcomes are looking at least that they've applied and been placed on a waiting list for a registered apprenticeship program. And as I said earlier, there's also some secondary outcomes that might apply to some of your participants, where they decide registered apprenticeship is not for them. Maybe they're ready to go directly into a job, or perhaps they decide, well, I'm going to go into further school and say at community college or university or something like that. And so these work plans are required both for the year and I think quarter by quarter throughout that first year. The next attachment is demographics. So this is your expectation of the participants that you're going to serve. Again, the target populations are based on the environmental justice communities and R3 communities, as well as a couple of other kind of named groups, either foster care alumni, returning residents, or displaced energy workers, and just talk about how many of each of those that you expect to serve, and if you have multiple locations, kind of breaking it down location by location. And then also the services that you're expected to deliver to those participants. The third attachment is sample curriculum, and the NOFO provides one of those already filled out as an example. But you should be able to do this based on the curriculum that you decide to use, either that an ABTU or NCCER should provide you with the information that you need to fill out, the number of instruction hours for each component of your training. So submission information. Sorry, this is the last attachment, the staffing plan. Again, this was included in the NOFO itself, but also as an attachment where you lay out the names of the staff members or partners that you expect to deliver each of these roles. For your partners, this is where you include the memorandums of understanding with your partners in your application. And those MOUs are going to detail the responsibilities of those partners, including just like the main grantee has to spell out their staffing and how they expect to deliver these services. The MOU should spell that out for your partners. Also include your memorandums of understanding with apprenticeship programs or other industry organizations or employers, including spelling out if they have a direct matriculation of your program graduates into their apprenticeship programs. So, like I said, we're going to walk through that budget template in other sessions. But again, just kind of summarizing the scoring of the applications. Again, that the qualifications of your team and that project description, 70% of the scoring is based on those two, obviously critical components to your application. So kind of the process of reviewing and determining who will be awarded the grants. First of all of the applications, first of all, it goes through this kind of check to make sure that the applications meet all of the technical requirements, that you've included all of the required documents, that the applicant is GETA approved beforehand. And so any application that meets all of those kind of technical requirements will be put sorted by region. So each region will be scored separately, and then teams of reviewers. So the applications are reviewed by multiple people. It's not just one person going through and scoring these. They have teams of people that will review the applications independently and score them independently. Then they come together and make sure that they all agree on the order of quality based on the scoring rubric. And so the highest scoring application in each region will be prioritized. And so that highest scoring application is the one that DCO will approach and enter into a final grant negotiation phase where DCO may decide, well, yes, this was the best application, but some small changes might need to be made in the final agreement to make sure that the services are all delivered in the way that they expect them to be. There might be some budget negotiations and things, but and so then the purpose of that negotiation is to come to a final agreement where there's grant terms that include a budget that everyone agrees on and the scope of work, which is largely based on that application, the scope of work that is laid out in that application. And then if agreement can be made on all of those issues between the potential grantee and DCO, then that final grant award is made. Again, so here's another section of the NOFO, the award administration information and the state award agency contacts. Again, a lot of this is just kind of formalities that need to go in these kinds of documents, but it's important that you understand this as you're putting together your application, because there are some requirements in this section that are going to require some staff time to meet. things like reporting requirements. These grants will likely have a quarterly report attached to them. So it's going to require some staff time to put together that quarterly report and get it submitted on time. And so think about that. Who's going to be responsible for that, and how is that going to impact your budget? So don't think that just because you made it to the scoring portion of the NOFO that nothing else is important. It's important to read the whole thing and think about how different requirements of fulfilling the grant once it's awarded are going to affect the way you staff your project and related budget. And then the other information, as I said earlier, there are other technical assistance sessions. The bidders conference was last week, and that is recorded, and I believe on the website by now. There's going to be GATA training. I believe that's Friday morning. And then there will be also one or two other either formal technical assistance sessions where there's going to be some prepared content and maybe some time for question and answer. But we also have scheduled some, I think, what we're calling office hours, where if you have questions about the NOFO or the process, you can just come ask those questions and talk to somebody about questions you have about the NOFO. Yeah, so the bidders conference link is on the website, and Linda just posted the link. So finally, submission. Again, this is spelled out in the NOFO, all of the components that are required, the documents that need to be included in your application package. Some of them are simply fill in the blanks kinds of forms. Others, that technical proposal, 20 pages, that's really, I think, going to require the most effort. But make sure you understand that that's not the only piece of the application package. That all of these other documents that either are included in the NOFO or are linked on the NOFO webpage are also required. Deadline, June 2nd at 5 p.m. They're delivered through this electronic form on that Smartsheet link there. DCO is really requesting that anybody that is planning to apply, that they submit a notice. And this is just a simple one-page form saying, yes, we plan to apply for this. No other detail is required. And this is really to help them understand what it's going to take to score and kind of work through the process to get these grants. It takes a lot of effort on the back end once these applications are entered in to make sure they have the resources necessary to timely get these grants out after the applications are received. They request that you let them know if you're going to apply. I think the link that is included in the application and is on the screen here is wrong. That's the same link as for the application. So I believe some communication about the correct link has gone out, but we'll get that out as well. So just some kind of final tips here. Don't wait until the last minute. We all have technical challenges sometimes, especially with electronic submission. So don't plan to submit at 4:30 on the 2nd. Try to get that application in a day or two early. I think it's really helpful to put a draft together of your technical proposal and share it with some people within your organization or even outside of your organization. Ask them, what am I missing? What can be more clear about this application? That can really help you improve your final product. Here's the dates for the upcoming technical assistance Friday GATA training. and we're calling some technical assistant workshop next week for first-time applicants, but anybody is welcome to attend that session if you want to learn more. And at 2:30 on the nose, we get to the last slide. We request that you submit questions through this email address because we want to make sure that we capture those questions and provide responses that are available to everyone. And so all of the questions that get submitted to this email address get posted on the FAQ section of the web page so that everybody has the benefit of the response to those questions.
Just a quick correction on that. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah.
I just put a link to a question submission smart sheet. It's linked on the NOFA website. Questions can be submitted anytime, even after May 5th. While you can certainly submit your questions to that email address, we would prefer pre-apprenticeship questions to be submitted through the website that I linked. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Looking forward to seeing the applications and interacting with you over the next few weeks as you put them together as necessary. And again, this has been recorded, and the slides and the recording of the session will be posted on the website. Thanks, everyone, for attending.